The galaxy was wide and full of wonders, but not every wonder brought joy. Some wonders brought terror and some brought nightmares. On the dark edge of the Orion Belt, there was a planet that no one dared to visit anymore. Its skies were always red and its ground was always shaking, because on that world lived a monster no alien could control. The creature had no name that stayed for long. Each race that faced it gave it a new title: the Beast, the Doombringer, the End of Worlds. It was taller than the largest war machine, its body covered in scales that shone like black steel. Its eyes were burning holes of fire, and when it roared, whole cities shook like fragile glass. Alien fleets had tried to destroy it. The reptilian warlords of Zyros sent their hunters, and none returned. The crystal beings of Solara trapped it in cages of light, but the monster broke them with a single scream. Even the machines of the Mekon Hive, who had conquered dozens of star systems, failed when their strongest weapons bounced harmlessly off its skin. Every time the aliens thought they had won, the monster rose again. It crushed armies, burned ships, and tore apart entire colonies. Planets were abandoned, space routes were closed, and in every council meeting of every great race, the same words were repeated: "This beast cannot be controlled." Fear spread across the stars like a disease. No one wanted to speak of the planet anymore. But fear did not erase the danger. The monster grew stronger every cycle, wandering across the dead planet, hungry for more. If it ever found a way off that world, the galaxy itself could fall. In the great council hall of Valon Prime, the alien leaders gathered again. Their voices were full of anger and fear. "We have lost more fleets," one shouted. "Our weapons are useless," cried another. "The beast cannot be stopped. It is impossible." Some spoke of sealing the planet with energy walls. Others wanted to destroy the star itself and burn the entire system. But both plans required resources greater than empires could share. No one trusted the others, and so they argued. Voices clashed. Alliances broke. And all the while, the shadow of the monster grew larger in their minds. At the back of the council chamber, a single voice spoke. It was calm, steady, unlike the others. The voice belonged to a being smaller than all the rest. No scales, no glowing crystals, no mechanical body, just a human standing among giants. The council turned and laughed. "A human? Here?" hissed a Zyros general. "They are fragile, weak, short-lived," mocked a Solaran noble. "What can your kind do when even our greatest powers failed?" The human did not answer their insults. He only looked at them with steady eyes. "I will face the monster," he said. The laughter grew louder, echoing in the hall like thunder. "You? Alone? You will be crushed in a heartbeat," they roared. "Impossible! A fool's dream!" shouted the Mekon Prime. But the human did not move, did not bend. "Every weapon you made has failed," the human said quietly. "You call it impossible because you see only one path: destruction. But humans, we do not believe in impossible. We always find another way." The council grew silent, some shaking their heads, others whispering in secret. Was this madness? Or was this courage? The Solaran noble leaned forward, her crystal eyes shining with doubt. "And if you fail, human? If this monster kills you as it killed thousands before you?" The human did not smile, but his voice was steady. "Then I will die, but I will not die running. If one human stands, then the galaxy knows there is still hope." The words spread across the chamber like fire. Even those who mocked him felt something stir in their hearts, something dangerous, something powerful, belief. But belief was not enough for the council. They voted, they argued, and finally, with hesitation, they agreed. The human would be sent. Not because they believed he could win, but because they believed he would fail. And maybe, just maybe, his death would buy them time. And so, a transport ship carried the human to the cursed planet. Aliens gathered in orbit, watching through screens, waiting for the end. The ship landed on the cracked surface, its metal frame shaking from the monster's roar in the distance. The doors opened, and the human stepped out. No heavy armor, no giant weapons, only a small pack on his back, and his calm eyes looking at the blood-red sky. The ground shook again, louder this time. Rocks rolled. Dust rose into the air. Far away, a shadow moved. Huge, terrible, walking closer with each step. The monster had felt the arrival of new prey. Its roar split the heavens. And even the watching fleets shivered. The aliens whispered to each other, "It is coming. The end is coming." But the human did not move. He stood in the open, waiting, as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. And when the monster appeared at last, towering above him, the aliens gasped in fear, the creature's burning eyes locked onto the human. The ground cracked beneath its steps, and with one final roar it charged. The council members whispered the same word again. Impossible. But the human whispered back, "Watch me." The red skies of the cursed planet burned above. Ash floated in the air like dying snow. And in the middle of that broken land stood the human, tiny and fragile compared to the monster before him. From orbit, fleets of alien ships watched. Leaders, generals, and scientists held their breath. They had sent the human here not out of hope but out of disbelief. To them, this was nothing more than a test, a sacrifice. They expected blood, screams, and failure. But the human did not shake. His feet were steady on the cracked ground, his eyes lifted to the beast that loomed over him like a mountain of fire and steel. And in his hands he carried no weapon, no blade, no gun, only a small case filled with tools the aliens could not understand. The monster roared again. Its voice split the air like a storm. Stone shattered. Rivers of dust spread across the ground. Even from space, the sound made alien soldiers cover their ears. Yet the human stood calm. He raised his hand slowly, not in attack but in greeting. The aliens shouted through their comms, "He is insane, the beast will crush him. Order him back to the ship. Stop this madness now!" But no order reached the human. He had cut off all channels before landing. No voice but his own would guide him. The monster moved closer, its burning eyes fixed on the human like twin suns of rage. Every step made the ground shake. Every breath filled the air with smoke. It bent low, its jaws opening, teeth shining like blades. One bite could end him, but the human did not move back. Instead, he placed his hand on the ground and pressed his fingers into the dust. He looked at the scars in the earth, the claw marks burned into the stone. He whispered softly, almost too low for the ships to hear, "I see you." The monster froze for a moment, not because it understood the words, but because the sound was not filled with fear. It had heard screams, shouts, and curses for years. It had smelled the fear of armies and the hatred of empires, but never before had it heard a voice that carried no anger, only calm, steady presence. From the ships, the aliens blinked in disbelief. What is he doing? Why does the monster pause? This cannot be real. The human stood straight again. He opened the small case and pulled out strange objects. Not weapons but tools. A scanner that hummed with soft light, a vial of glowing liquid, and a piece of cloth covered with strange marks. To the aliens these were nothing, but to the human, they were the language of trust. The monster growled, a deep sound that shook the air. It lowered its head, nostrils flaring. The human did not flinch. He placed the cloth on the ground and stepped back. The cloth carried scent, plants, earth, and water, not from this planet but from a world full of life. The monster's burning eyes shifted. For a heartbeat, its rage faded into something else, something the aliens had never seen before. Confusion. The alien council grew restless. "This is not strategy," a Solaran noble shouted. "He wastes time," barked the Zyros general. "Order the ships to strike now while the beast is distracted." But another voice, quieter, spoke in fear. "If we strike now, we may kill the human too. And if the human is right, we may lose our only chance." The council fell into chaos, but the human on the ground heard nothing. He knelt slowly, letting the monster's shadow fall over him. He lifted the scanner and let its light run across the beast's chest. The screen flickered, showing strange patterns, deep scars, broken bones, wounds that never healed. The human's eyes softened. "You're not just a monster," he whispered. "You're in pain." The fleets above could not hear the words, but they could see the change. The monster tilted its head. Its roar died in its throat. Its burning eyes narrowed as if it was trying to understand. The aliens watching shook in disbelief. This cannot be. No one has ever lasted this long. Why does it not kill him? The human reached into his case again. He pulled out the glowing vial and held it high. The liquid shimmered like captured starlight. The monster's gaze followed it, curious, cautious. The human placed it on the ground between them and stepped back once more. A gift, not a weapon. Silence fell over the battlefield. For the first time in centuries, the monster did not attack. For the first time it waited. The air was thick, heavy with tension. The aliens in orbit leaned forward, holding their breath, and the human stood in that silence, steady as stone. He had not fought. He had not run. But already, he had done what no army, no empire, no weapon had ever done. He had made the impossible pause. The monster's claws scraped against the earth. It stepped closer, sniffing at the vial. Its chest rumbled like thunder, but it did not strike. It lowered its head closer to the human. Their eyes met, fire and flesh, rage and calm, and for one heartbeat in the broken land, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. From the ships, above, the aliens whispered, "This is impossible." But deep inside, they felt something dangerous, something they had forgotten. Hope. The monster's head lowered, its burning eyes fixed on the tiny figure below. Ash drifted through the red air, carried by the hot wind. The ground trembled with each breath the beast released, and yet the human did not step back. For the fleets above, time felt frozen. Generals leaned forward, their claws digging into metal tables. Crystals glowed with nervous light in Celeran hands. Mecon machines tilted their heads, their processors unable to explain what they were. Seeing, the impossible was happening. The beast was not attacking, it was listening. The human's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "I will not hurt you," he said. The words were simple. They carried no power, no command, but the way he spoke made them heavy, like the stones that had endured centuries of storms. The monster's nostrils flared, its hot breath washed over the human. Most beings would have fallen to their knees in terror, but the human only lifted his chin. His hand reached forward, not fast, not reckless, slow, open as if inviting the beast to choose. The aliens gasped. "He is mad," cried a Zyros general. "It will bite off his arm," shouted a Solaran elder. "End this now," demanded the Mecon Prime. But still, no one gave the order to fire. Not yet. Something in the silence held them back. The monster's jaw opened, teeth glistening like blades. Its roar began to rise from deep within its chest. The fleets braced. But then, the roar did not come. The monster stopped, its head tilted like a predator studying a strange prey, or like a wounded soul trying to understand kindness. The human stepped closer, each step slow, each breath controlled, every part of him saying, "I am not here to fight you." From his pack, he pulled another tool, a small device that hummed with soft energy. He pointed it at the ground near the beast's claws. The light scanned the broken soil. The results flashed across the device. Radiation, toxins, scars of endless battles. The human nodded slowly. He looked up at the towering creature and whispered, "You've been trapped here too long, haven't you?" The words, though simple, carried weight. The monster growled low, not in rage but in something else. Confusion, curiosity, maybe even sorrow. The aliens above shook their heads. "This is nonsense," said the Zyros general. "The creature doesn't understand him," argued a Celeran noble. But none could explain why the monster still hadn't attacked. The human crouched. He touched the broken earth with his bare hand. He could feel the heat, the trembling, the pain beneath. He lifted a small piece of stone, scarred with claw marks. He turned it in his hand and then set it down, as if showing, "The monster, I see what you have suffered. The beast's chest rose and fell, its glowing eyes narrowed, its claws flexed in the dust. The air between them grew heavy. Every alien heart watching beat faster. This was no longer a battle, it was something else, something no one had words for. Then, the unthinkable happened. The monster lowered itself further, its massive head sinking toward the human. Closer, closer until the human could feel the heat of its skin. The ground shook as it exhaled. The human reached out his hand. His fingers brushed the edge of the monster's jaw, and for the first time in history, the monster did not kill. It allowed. The touch gasps erupted across the fleets. No, this cannot be. It accepts him? Impossible, the Celeran noble whispered in awe. Has a human done what no empire could? The monster blinked slowly. The fire in its eyes dimmed, just for a heartbeat. Its massive body rumbled, like distant thunder, not a roar of rage but a sound that carried weight, as if it was speaking in a voice too deep for words. The human lowered his hand. He did not push his luck. He stepped back a little, showing respect, but the connection had been made. The first contact had happened. Not with weapons, not with force, but with patience and courage above. The alien leaders argued in fear and disbelief. If the beast follows him, humanity will rise above us all, growled the Zyros general. This cannot be allowed, hissed the Mekon Prime. But others stayed silent, because deep inside, they had seen something powerful. The human had proven the monster was not mindless rage. It could choose, and it had chosen not to destroy him. The human looked up at the fleets in the sky. He knew they were watching, doubting, fearing, but he said nothing to them. His words, his heart, were only for the creature before him. You are not alone anymore, he whispered. The monster's head lifted again. It let out a sound, not a roar of rage, but something lower, almost mournful. A cry that rolled across the broken land. A cry that made even the strongest alien warriors tremble. For in that cry, they heard not just anger, but centuries of pain, centuries of chains, centuries of being called a monster. And now, for the first time, someone had listened. The human stood there, small beneath its shadow, but in that moment he was taller than any empire, because he had redefined what was possible, and somewhere deep in the monster's fire-lit eyes, something changed, not tamed, not controlled, but awakened. In the Grand Council chamber of Valon Prime, silence ruled the room. Holographic screens glowed above the round table, each one showing the cursed planet below. The monster and the human stood in the broken land, locked in a moment that shook the galaxy. For the first time in history, the beast had not attacked. It had allowed the human to touch it. It had lowered its head in front of him, and that single act was enough to send waves of fear through every empire. The Celeran noble was the first to break the silence, her crystal form shining with nervous light. This is unnatural, she whispered. No living thing has ever stood before the beast and lived. What we are seeing is not possible. The Zyros general slammed his clawed fist against the table. His reptilian eyes burned with fury. This cannot be allowed to continue. If the monster bends to the will of a human, then humanity will rise above us all. Our armies will be nothing, our fleets useless. The Mekon Prime's voice was cold and metallic. Its machine body flickered with blue light as it processed the scene. Observation. The beast did not act hostile toward the human. Analysis. Probability of control by human. High. Threat level. Catastrophic. The chamber filled with voices. Some shouted in panic. Some demanded immediate strikes. Others whispered of new alliances. But beneath all the noise, a single truth grew clear. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. The Solaran noble lifted her hand, her voice calm but sharp. You all fear the monster's loyalty, but you should fear the human more. He has shown us something dangerous. He has shown us that what we called impossible was only our own failure. Her words spread through the chamber like a shadow. The empires had ruled for centuries by declaring what could not be done. They had built their power on walls of fear and limits. But now a single human had broken those walls. And if one human could do this, what could the rest of them achieve? The Zyros general hissed in rage. We must strike now before this connection. Grows destroy the human, destroy the beast, if necessary, destroy the entire planet. The Mekon Prime's voice cut through the room like a blade. Logic supports this course. Risk of waiting increases each second. If human succeeds, all empires fall. But not everyone agreed. A younger voice rose from the lower seats. It belonged to a quiet delegate from a minor race, the Thorans, small and often ignored. They leaned forward, their voice trembling but brave. Or, we could learn. If a human can do what our armies could not, perhaps there is another way. Perhaps the beast is not our enemy. Perhaps it is our reflection. The chamber erupted in chaos again. Some laughed at the Thyran, others shouted them down. But a few, only a few, remained silent, considering the words. Back on the cursed planet, the screen showed the human kneeling again. He placed another glowing vial on the ground. The beast's massive claws scraped near it, but still it did not attack. The impossible was happening again, the Solaran noble whispered almost to herself. Hope is the most dangerous weapon of all. If the human gives the galaxy hope, nothing will stop his kind. Fear turned to paranoia. Already the empires imagined new wars. Wars not against the beast, but against humanity. They remembered Earth. Small, young, fragile. And yet now, one of its children stood face to face with the doom of worlds and lived. The Mekon Prime shifted its metallic frame. Recommendation: immediate orbital strike. Erase human, erase beast, erase planet. The council fell quiet. Every leader stared at the screens. Every leader felt the weight of the decision. Destroy the human now, and they might stop a threat. But if they struck too soon, they might destroy their only chance at survival. The Zyros general growled. Do you not see, this is the time, one shot and it ends. But his claws trembled. Even he felt the uncertainty. What if the shot failed? What if the monster turned its fury on them all? Above the cursed planet, the fleets shifted into attack position. Cannons glowed, energy beams warmed. Every soldier felt the tension in their bones. And down below, the human slowly raised his head. He looked up at the sky. He knew what was coming. He could almost feel their fear pressing against him. But he did not run. He did not shout. Instead, he placed his hand on the beast again, his calm voice rising into the air. They fear what they do not understand, he whispered. But you and I, we are not finished. The beast rumbled, a low growl that rolled across the land. It did not move against him, it did not strike. Instead, it lifted its head and roared toward the sky. A roar that shook the atmosphere, a roar that reached the ships above, a roar that said, I will not be caged again. In the council chamber, fear turned into terror. If the beast now stood with the human, the galaxy was no longer safe. The Solaran noble leaned forward, her voice sharp as crystal. The time of alien empires is ending, and the age of humanity has begun. The roar of the beast rolled across the cursed planet. It echoed into the skies, shaking the fleets that hovered above. Alien soldiers clutched their weapons, ready to fire. Leaders shouted orders through comms, but still, no one pulled the trigger. Something in that roar froze them. It was not the sound of mindless rage. It was the sound of something broken, something wounded, something alive. The human stood beneath the shadow of the beast, his hand still resting on its scarred skin. He felt the tremble of its body, the heat of its breath, and in that moment he understood. This was not a monster born to destroy. This was a prisoner, a creature chained by the mistakes of the galaxy. The human stepped back slowly. He pulled out his small scanner again. The device hummed as it scanned the beast's massive chest and shoulders. Lines of data flashed across the screen. Wounds layered upon wounds, fractures that never healed, energy burns too precise to be natural. The human's eyes narrowed. These are not battle scars, he whispered. These are chains. The aliens watching leaned closer to their screens. What is he saying? Asked the Solaran noble. The Mekon Prime's processors whirred. analyzing every movement, but none could see what the human saw. They only saw power, rage, and fire. He saw pain. The human raised his voice, not just for the beast, but for the fleets above. You called it a monster because it fought you, but none of you ever asked why. You never looked deeper. You only saw an enemy. I see something else. The beast rumbled, its massive head lowering again. The human pointed to the scars burned into its neck, circular, deep, etched into the flesh like branding. These are not natural marks. This creature was not born free. It was made into a weapon. Gasps erupted across the council chamber. Impossible, shouted the Zyros general. No power could chain such a beast, cried the Celeran noble. But the Mekon Prime's voice was cold and certain. Analysis confirms high probability of artificial control methods. Conclusion, the beast was engineered, not born wild. The council fell into chaos. If the human was right, then the monster was not their doom. It was their crime. Some ancient empire, long gone or hiding, had created it. And the galaxy had paid the price for centuries. The human stepped closer to the beast. His voice softened, steady. They hurt you, didn't they? They chained you, used you, broke you. And when you fought to be free, they called you a monster. The beast's chest rumbled, its fire-lit eyes dimming for a moment. It lowered its head, pressing it close to the ground. As if remembering, as if agreeing, the human reached into his pack and pulled out another tool, a healing injector, small and fragile compared to the giant before him. He walked to the beast's leg where one wound still burned, a cut that glowed with unnatural energy. He pressed the injector against it. The liquid flowed, hissing as it touched the wound. The beast growled, the ground shaking, but it did not strike. Instead, it stilled, its massive body trembling like a storm about to break. From orbit, the aliens could not believe their eyes. He heals it? He treats it like a soldier, not a beast. No, this cannot be allowed, the Celeran noble whispered. He is changing it. Not with chains, not with power, but with mercy. The human stepped back, his eyes never leaving the beast. You are not a monster. You are a survivor. And they fear you because you remind them of what they did. The fleets above grew restless, cannons hummed with rising energy. The Zyros general barked. Enough, fire now, before this goes further. But no one moved, because deep inside, every soldier, every commander wanted to see what would happen next. The beast lifted its head again. Its fire-lit eyes met the human's steady gaze. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, the beast lowered its massive body to the ground. It did not bow, it did not submit, but it rested. For the first time in centuries, it rested. A wave of shock spread through the fleets. The impossible had become real. The monster that no alien could control had chosen to trust a human. The Mekon Prime's processors hummed louder. Warning. Scenario exceeds predicted models. If human establishes bond, galaxy power structure destabilizes. The Celeran noble leaned back, her crystal eyes glowing. This is no longer about the beast. This is about humanity. They do not destroy. They change. The human sat on the cracked ground beside the beast. He let the silence stretch. He knew the aliens were watching. He knew they feared him now, more than ever. But his voice was calm as he whispered to the creature, "You are free now, and together we will show them what impossible means." The beast's chest rumbled again, a sound not of rage but of agreement. It lifted its massive head and released a roar that rolled across the land. But this time, the roar was different. It was not the cry of a prisoner. It was the cry of something that had found hope, and the galaxy trembled not from fear of the monster but from fear of what one human had awakened. The cursed planet was quiet. For the first time in centuries, the monster was no longer tearing the ground apart. No longer roaring with blind rage, it was resting, its massive body curled like a mountain finally allowed to sleep. And beside it sat the human, small as a shadow against its size. He did not stand as a conqueror. He did not chain it as the empires once tried. He simply stayed near, calm, steady, like a promise that the creature was no longer alone. Above, the fleets whispered in disbelief. Alien soldiers who once trembled at the beast's name now trembled for a new reason. Their weapons, their empires, their science. All had failed to do what one fragile human had done with nothing but courage, patience, and trust. The Solaran. Noble's voice broke the silence of the council chamber. Her crystal form glowed faintly, reflecting her unease. Do you understand what this means? The monster obeys no empire, no fleet, no weapon, and yet it listens to a human. This is not control. It is something far more dangerous. The Zyros general snarled, his scales bristling. Dangerous? It is a disaster. The galaxy now sees that humans can command the impossible. If they tame the untamable, they will rise above us all. We must end this before it spreads. The Mekon Prime's metallic voice was sharp as steel. Observation. The beast has not been subdued. It has formed voluntary alignment with human subject. Analysis. Loyalty detected. Conclusion. Probability of permanent bond. High. The council. Chamber erupted in chaos. Some called for orbital strikes, others whispered of assassins, but a few remained silent. Because what they saw was not only fear, it was something older, something they had not felt in ages. It was awe. Back on the planet, the human stood at last. He placed his hand on the beast's scarred hide one more time, and as the aliens above watched, the monster rose too. It towered into the red sky, taller than any building. But when it moved, it did not move in rage. It moved with purpose. Its burning eyes followed the human's steps. Like a guardian, gasps filled the fleets. No, it follows him. It chooses him. Impossible. The human turned his gaze upward as if he could see the ships beyond the clouds. He spoke, not in a shout, but in a voice steady enough to pierce the silence of the galaxy. You called it impossible to face this creature without fear. You called it impossible to make it pause. You called it impossible to earn its trust, but look, your impossible is only the limit of your own courage. The monster roared, a sound that shook the very skies. But it was not rage. It was not pain. It was declaration, a cry that told the galaxy, the chains are broken, and the old rules are gone. The Celeron noble whispered, he is rewriting the meaning of impossible. In the council chamber, fear turned to dread, because if one human could do this, what could 100 humans do? What could an entire world of them achieve? The galaxy had always seen Earth as small, fragile, unimportant, but now the smallest species had shaken the pillars of power. The Zyros general slammed his fist again. No! We cannot let this continue. If we allow the human to live, if we allow this bond to spread, then every empire will fall to their shadow. The Mekon Prime's voice hummed in agreement. Recommendation: eliminate human subject immediately. Strategic strike: terminate bond before it stabilizes. Cannons on the fleets began to glow. Engines shifted into attack positions. Soldiers prepared for orders. The sky above the planet filled with deadly light, but the human only looked up. His eyes calm, unshaken. As if he had expected this all along, he placed his hand on the beast's neck and whispered, they fear you because they fear change, but together, we will show them the truth. The beast's burning eyes turned toward the sky. Its chest rumbled, a growl that grew into thunder, and with one earth-shaking step, it stood beside the human like a mountain of fire. Not as a weapon, not as a monster, but as an ally. The fleets hesitated. Their fingers hovered over the triggers, but no one fired. Because deep inside, every soldier knew. If the human could tame the impossible, then perhaps the word impossible no longer meant anything. The Celeron noble rose in the council chamber, her voice sharp with fear and wonder. This is the beginning of a new age, not the age of empires, not the age of monsters, but the age of humans, and they will not be stopped. On the cursed planet, the human looked at the beast. The beast looked back. 2 survivors, one small, one vast, and yet, for the first time, equal. The human lifted, his head toward the skies filled with fleets, and whispered, "You built walls of fear, we will break them. You chained the impossible, we will free it." And the galaxy shivered, because in that moment they realized the truth. The word impossible no longer belonged to them. It belonged to humanity. The galaxy held its breath. Above the cursed planet, fleets hovered in silence, cannons armed, engines ready, every soldier waiting for the order to fire, and yet no one dared move because on the ground below, the impossible had already happened. The beast stood beside the human, not as a prisoner, not as a monster, but as an equal. Its burning eyes no longer full of blind rage, its body no longer trembling with endless pain. For the first time in centuries, it had chosen. And it had chosen to stand with a human. The human placed his hand on its scarred hide. He looked up at the fleets watching from the sky, and his voice carried across the comms, calm and steady. "You feared this creature because you could not understand it. You called it a monster because you only knew how to destroy, but I tell you this. The real monster was never the beast, it was your fear." The words spread across the ships like fire. Soldiers who once trembled at the beast now trembled at the human's voice. Some felt anger, some felt awe, but all felt the truth. The Zyros general roared in rage. "This is madness, he dares to challenge us all, strike now!" But his claws shook, because even he could not deny what he had seen. The Mekon Prime's voice hummed with static. Observation: the impossible has been redefined. Conclusion: humans are a destabilizing force. But even its machine logic could not explain how one human had undone centuries of failure. The Solaran noble leaned forward, her crystal body glowing softly. "Listen to your own fear. For the first time, you fear not the beast, but the human. And perhaps that is the lesson we needed." On the planet below, the human turned to the beast. "You are free now, but freedom is not just escape. It is choice. What will you choose?" The beast's massive head lowered. Its burning eyes met his steady gaze. And then, with a sound like rolling thunder, it knelt, not in chains, not in defeat, but in respect. Gasps filled the fleets. The monster that had crushed armies, burned colonies, and shattered empires, now bowed to a single human. The human stepped forward, placing his hand on its jaw. His voice was quiet but strong. "Together, we will protect this galaxy, not through fear, not through chains, but through hope." The Kir, fleets above, faltered. No one gave the order to fire because in their hearts, they knew the truth. If they struck now, they would not only destroy a man and a beast, they would destroy the chance for something greater. The story spread faster than light, across colonies, across worlds, across empires. Whispers turned to voices. Voices turned to songs. And soon, every corner of the galaxy knew the tale of the monster no alien could control, and the human who redefined impossible. On distant planets, children spoke the story in wonder. Soldiers repeated it in hushed voices around fires, and rulers whispered it in fear behind closed doors. For they all knew a new age had begun. The Solaran noble said it best in the council chamber. "Humans do not conquer with weapons, they conquer with belief, and belief is stronger than any fleet." The Zyros general growled, "They will rise, and when they do, they will not ask permission." But even he spoke the words with respect, for the galaxy now understood. Humanity was no longer the fragile species they once ignored. They were the species that had turned the impossible into reality. On the cursed planet, the human looked up at the stars. The beast stood beside him, silent and strong. The ground was cracked, the sky still red, but for the first time the land felt alive again. The human's eyes narrowed as he whispered, "This was only the beginning. There are more chains to break, more lies to uncover, and more monsters waiting to be freed." The beast rumbled, a deep sound of agreement, its massive body casting a shadow across the broken ground. Not a shadow of terror, but a shadow of hope. The fleets above slowly withdrew. No shots fired, no final battle. Because they all knew the truth. A legend had been born. One that could not be erased with fire or fear. Across the galaxy, a new name spread, not of the beast, not of the empires, but of the human who changed everything. He became known as the Impossible Breaker, the one who looked at the unthinkable and said, "Watch me." And wherever his story was told, aliens felt something dangerous awaken in their hearts, something they had not felt in centuries. Hope, the human and the beast, walked together across the Red Land, their journey just beginning, but already the galaxy trembled, because it understood one thing clearly. The age of fear was ending and the age of humanity had begun.